any of these those people, Joanne? Okay. All right. Ay ananay ananay nay ay ananay nay ay ananay ananay nay ay ananay nay nay ay ananay ananay nay ay ananay ay nay 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 ay ananay ananay nay ay ananay anay ay ananay nay hay nanay ay ananay nay hay nanay ay ananay nay hay nanay ay ananay anay ay ananay nay hay nanay ay ananay nay hay nanay ay ananay ay hay nanay ay ananay ay nay. Erev Tov, everyone who's here in the chapel and those who are joining us on the live stream. It's always hard to believe to come back to this evening and know how many years it's been since Shira has died, and to acknowledge that it's the 25th yard site of Shira this year. And always in anticipation of this evening, I start to think about her and all the things that I loved about her, which were many things. One of the things that was, because I knew her when she was from about 14, obviously until she died at 20, I was accompanied her at very blossoming times of her life. And there were two spaces that those blossomings were particularly obvious, at least from my purview. One was when she started to do children's services. She was a little restrained, I would say. She was accompanying the Rosenthal girls, in particular Rebecca, who was less restrained, let's say, and a little more demanding in a certain way, still demanding in an amazing way, Rabbi Rebecca Rosenthal. But as she kind of got acquainted and got to know the kids, it was like she blossomed like a butterfly, and I can still see her walking in the door with her wizard costume, like that. She both had this very, a certain soft shyness, and also this like very butterflyness about her, and her wizardry, and her lightness, and that was also true in Teen Shabbat when she would lead services, that at the beginning she was kind of quiet, and then you could see her find her voice and kind of settle into who she was and the love that she had for the liturgy. And those were the two places where in her time at BJ, I saw her move from like a young person to someone who was more in her fullness and kind of trusting in herself and watching her, and in a sense, her own accounting of who she wanted to be and showing up for herself, which is a very beautiful thing to witness, and one of the gifts of watching being in a community for a long time and having the gift of accompanying particularly young people in those very precious years. And one of the other things that obviously I didn't get to see the fullness, because never did any of us get to see her fullness, was when she would come back from college, and we would often, for the times that we had the chance to like have a coffee. I don't drink coffee, but did she drink coffee? I don't remember. At City Diner, and like it was watching her kind of intellectually grow and try to wrestle with her own understanding of her Judaism as she explored new pathways in college, and obviously that was never completed. It was a story of her that we would have loved to see her butterfly come into full fruition. And so it's always in this moment that I have such appreciation and love for what I got to witness and the life that she lived with such love and levity and wizardry and care, and also how her mind worked, and which is why we also have a teaching in her honor, because a lot of people saw the child, a counselory aspect of her at BJ, but they didn't see as much the side of her that was a deeply, interested and intellectual young woman, and so. And also, as I come to touch those moments of her and those experiences with her, it also comes with what's chaser, so many years of what's missing. So we gather both in gratitude for who she was, and also always with an ongoing sense of chaser, what isn't, and what we've missed for so many years. And this year, it's a particular privilege to have Rabbi David Wolkenfield with us. David and I are in a Hartman Rabbi Fellowship that began a year and a half ago or so. And we spend a month almost in the summer together, and then we have a week in Israel in the winter. And last winter, actually, I have the BJ trip starting on Tuesday, and then David and I, please God, will be in Israel, assuming things stay quiet, in just almost 2 weeks, or a week and a half. And it was on Shabbat, actually, when we were sitting at the Shabbat table, that we were talking, and all of a sudden it became clear that David was a friend of Shira's in high school and then in college. And he said he had been at the healing service that we did when she was in the hospital here in the sanctuary. And all of a sudden, like, what hit me so profoundly is this notion of here is a colleague, someone who I deeply respect, whose teaching in our cohort is really powerful. If you ever want to find a source for anything, anytime a source is mentioned when we're in a learning together, David then posted in our WhatsApp group, like within less than 30 seconds. It's amazing. And all of a sudden, in thinking about, I don't think about how old David is or how old I am, which is much older than David, but it's like when you see someone in their full fruition, and then you see who Shira could have become. And so it's a particular gift to welcome a colleague and someone who's becoming a friend, and someone also who knew Shira deeply and misses her, I think, just as deeply, and is here to teach in our community tonight. So Rabbi David Wolkenfield has served as the rabbi of Ohav Shalom in congregation in Washington, D.C. since July of 2023. Ohav Shalom is the oldest Orthodox congregation in Washington, D.C., and is the spiritual home to an active membership of hundreds of Jews of all ages and representing diverse religious backgrounds and viewpoints. I think that's probably an understatement, no? Particularly in the world we're living in now. Rabbi Wolkenfield treasures opportunities to serve as a resource for Jews who are seeking to connect more deeply to Torah and mitzvot in order to become better people and build strong communities. Rabbi Wolkenfield is a fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute's Rabbinic Leadership Initiative and is an alumnus of the Wexner Graduate Fellowship. He has completed one term as member of the Executive Committee of the Rabbinical Council of America and has served as a vice president of the International Rabbinic Fellowship and currently chairs its membership committee. His writing has been published in Tradition, The Lair House, Milin Chavivin, the Jewish Press, and the Huffington Post. Prior to his move to Washington, Rabbi Wolkenfield served for 10 years as the rabbi of Anshe Shalom B'nai Yisrael congregation in Chicago's Lakeview neighborhood. He began his full-time career at Princeton University, where together with his wife Sarah, he directed the Orthodox Union's Jewish Learning Initiative on campus. In his spare time, Rabbi Wolkenfield, I don't know that he has any spare time, honestly, but enjoys hiking, making tomato sauce from local ingredients, and writing whimsical poems about synagogue life. The Wolkenfields are the proud parents of 5 children, Noam, Akiva, Hillel, Sophie, and Yonatan. And the last thing, besides giving a really, really warm welcome to Rabbi Wolkenfield, is to say that it doesn't surprise me one bit that you are friends. Your warmth, your sharpness, and just the kind of what you exude feels like it's a perfect fit for who Shira was. And it's a beautiful thing to welcome you here. Baruch haba.
Thank you so much for that really warm and special introduction, and thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the framing of this evening. As I was thinking of what I wanted to share and what I wanted to learn together, I came at this with the sense that this is the continuation of my ongoing chavruta with Shira. We met the summer before senior year of high school and the Bronfman Youth Fellowship, and we famously and spectacularly argued a lot and debated a lot, and I think I sometimes had, of course I've overcome it, but sometimes had a rigid way of seeing things, and it drove her crazy, and we drove each other crazy, but in a way that was filled with a lot of love and respect, and I really miss having her in my life, and as my own ideas have continued to evolve, as I've learned things, I sort of miss being able to tell her, you were right about this, or maybe I was right about this actually, but this topic in particular, really, I feel that it's a continuation of that chavruta, that dialogue, that debate, that was a very important part of my life for a few years and continues to be a debate that I continue in her absence with her as a voice in my head. And also just thinking of reflecting on that Shabbat meal where we realized we had both been at the same place all those years ago and that's such a terrible, tragic time. I think as a college student, entering BJ and then at Shira's funeral, I don't think I understood, I couldn't have understood the degree of rabbinic leadership that you displayed in convening us for prayer and holding the grief of an entire community of friends. And I guess now that been around the block a few times, done the work, I'm just in awe of your capacity as a much younger rabbi to be able to do that, and it really is just great for BJ and for the Jewish people that you're continuing to serve in this really important congregation in this important way. So thank you for that. Okay, so here's our preface. Our preface is we're going to, and our overall topic. We're going to develop some metaphors and explore some metaphors for what it means to be committed to Judaism. And this is a conversation that is, I can give you a few examples from my own rabbinic practice where this comes up. I think we'll wait a minute to get to those. I want to first, though, as a preface, examine three sources, a Talmudic passage and then two pieces of contemporary scholarship that sort of open up the question of what it means to be committed to Judaism, what that looks like, and then we'll dive in earnest to some sources and really, hopefully, sink our teeth in it. So the first is one of my most delightful passages in the Talmud, passage from Bava Metzia about a kamiflagi b'mitivta d'rakia, our first source on page 1. There was a machloket, a dispute, a debate in the Heavenly Academy. There are source sheets, I think, in the back by the door, if you don't all have. And you can get, okay. Which it's just an interesting, what is the Jewish vision of heaven? And it's a giant yeshiva, a giant academy, and what do they do there? They argue, just like in any Beit Midrash, they argue there. But this dispute, it was about a arcane position of Jewish law, the laws of purity as described in Leviticus, the biblical, skin condition, a biblical leprosy, if the baheret, if the leper spot precedes a white hair growing from it, then the individual is tameh. The individual has this biblical condition. They're tameh, they're impure. They can't go to the temple until a purification ritual. The other way around, the person is tahor. What if you don't know? You don't necessarily, you wake up in the morning, was the hair first, you don't know, safek, you don't know. So there's a dispute in the heavenly yeshiva. The heavenly academy is debating this topic. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Omer, or God, the Holy Blessed One, says, this person, in a case of dispute, if you don't know, the individual's tahor, they're pure, they're not impure. But everyone else, all the souls of the sages who are there in the heavenly academy debate, they all take the opposite position against God, which is an incredible, if you can imagine a painting of Michelangelo, in the Sistine Chapel of what heaven looks like. And this is the opposite, okay? This is it's a Beit Midrash where we're all arguing against God. And how do you resolve that? About a matter of, right? I mean, God would know if the hair came first, right? So it's what are we even talking about? Okay, And of course, also it's a matter that was maybe practiced at some point in the earliest biblical time period, but long, long before this Talmudic passage is compiled, long before the people mentioned here lived, these mitzvot, these rituals, were no longer observed or able to be observed. So how are we going to resolve this? So the answer is Rabbi Bar Nachmani. Rabbi Bar Nachmani, a sage, a living Talmudic sage, he is going to settle the dispute. Because he once said, I am preeminent in the halachot of leprosy, and I'm preeminent in the halachot of ritual impurity in part by 10. So he knows all, he bragged, I guess, about being an expert in this area. Oops, it happened to be like a topic for debate in the Heavenly Academy, and so they're going to call upon him to resolve the dispute. Okay, I'll continue on in English. They sent a messenger from heaven to take his soul up to, how do you can't just ask him though, right? He has to be summoned to the Heavenly Academy to weigh in on this dispute, okay? You can't go, only one way to be admitted, okay? So the angel of death is sent to fetch him, but he's too busy studying Torah. His mouth doesn't cease from reciting Torah, so the angel of death is unable to claim him. So a wind blows. Rabbi Nachmani thinks that there's some sort of army approaching. It sounds like a trumpet or a horn. So he goes, oh no, what's going to happen? He interrupts himself. Better I should die with the angel of death than let this army capture me. So the angel of death takes him. And what does he do? Who does he side with? Okay, very smart man. He takes God's side in this dispute. Says the person is tahor, so he dies saying tahor, pure, which is God's side of this dispute. And a heavenly voice says, Rabbi Nachmani, your body is pure, your soul left your body with the word pure, beautiful, beautiful. And then a note fell from heaven, and there it comes in Pumbedita, where he in the academy there, in the Yeshiva Shalmata, the earthly academy, and the note says, Rabbi Nachmani has been summoned to the heavenly academy. Okay, he's dead. Okay, but this is why he got a promotion. Okay, it's the story of the two old men who are wondering if there's baseball in heaven. Do you know the joke about the? So they say that two baseball fans really wondered, is there baseball in heaven? So they say whoever dies first is going to come back in a dream and share whether or not there's baseball in heaven. So, Chaim dies first, okay, and very sad, okay. 3 days later, he appears to Shmuel in a dream. Shmuel, I have good news and I have bad news. The good news is there's baseball in heaven. The bad news is you're on deck, okay? So that's Rabbi Nachmani. He is summoned to the heavenly rakia, to the Vasitha rakia, the heavenly academy. He renders his opinion. So just what does it mean to be committed to Judaism? What is Jewish law in this conception, in this story? It's not about what we do, because none of these mitzvot were practiced at the time of Rabbi Bar Nachmani. He cultivated a knowledge about a mitzvah that he never performed, and with the goal of Torah study, of appreciating God's Torah, of cultivating that knowledge, of examining it, of developing a more sophisticated understanding of these laws and their principles and how they interact with each other. And this continues even in the highest realms of heaven, where the Holy Blessed One and all the souls of the dead Jewish scholars are debating these points. What does it mean to debate a point of Torah with God? I mean, right? God knows what God intended in giving us the mitzvot, but actually no. Somehow it's subject to interpretation and elucidation and thinking things through and arguing, and even God takes part in those debates. God kind of cheats a little bit by summoning, somebody to resolve the dispute on God's side of the debate, but it's not about, in this conception, commitment to Torah, commitment to mitzvot is about exploring ideas and countering ideas. It's not about obedience per se. And I think the story really illustrates that. It's also not about tranquility. It's not about knowing what to do. It's about ideas and countering ideas, serving God through really just investing as much of ourselves as possible in understanding these concepts and these ideas. Any other reactions to the story? If you've seen it before, you haven't seen it before, anything you want before we move on? Any other questions or comments or reactions? Okay. I love the story, so thank you for giving me the opportunity. So Chaim Saiman wrote a book a few years ago. He's a law professor at Villanova, and he wrote a book called Halakha, the Rabbinic Idea of Law. He opens the book with this story that we just studied together to show that translations of Halakha as Jewish law is a mistranslation, because this halachic point, this legal point that they were debating in the heavenly academy is not, to translate that as a legal point is very different from the type of legal debates that attorneys have or that citizens have trying to, as we encounter the law, because it's not about what we do, it's not about, there's no enforcement method, it just doesn't really, it's not really similar to law as the term is used in many of our, there's some attorneys in the room, right? This is not quite, I don't know, maybe in law schools they tell stories of, in the great law school in heaven that, there's debates between, I don't think so, maybe, okay? And so he gives another example, another story. A few years ago on a Shabbat, a flyer was posted in a synagogue in an upper middle class Orthodox community outside New York City whose congregants tend to be doctors, lawyers, real estate developers, business people, and white-collar professionals. Sounds like a shul. The flyer publicized a lecture to be delivered that afternoon by a guest rabbi visiting from another community. Most of the information provided was routine: the rabbi's name, the time and place of the lecture, the names of the sponsors who made it possible. You've seen flyers like this, I'm sure. On any given weekend, similar announcements can be found in thousands of churches and community centers across the country. Two things, however, set this flyer apart. One was the topic of the lecture: bidding competitively on goods or properties when others are previously involved, an issue vaguely related to what lawyers call tortious interference with contract. The other was the rabbi's title: Dean of an Advanced Institute of Talmudic Study, specializing in business and commercial law. It is as if, say, the chair of Harvard's Law School's Forum on Corporate and Financial Regulation had been invited to share his recondite expertise with the parishioners. For a law professor who teaches the subject of contract law, which Chaim Saman does, these details might be fascinating, but aside from professors of contract law, this is hardly a matter of general interest and is certainly of dubious appeal to a lay audience, much less to anyone searching for spiritual fulfillment. Indeed, in any other setting in contemporary America, a lecture bearing this title would be delivered by a law professor speaking to students or academic colleagues, or by an attorney addressing practitioners or clients. So here you have a group of Jews studying an arcane topic of Jewish law as part of their, devotion to Torah study. So it's to translate, to understand halakha, this topic, as a legal topic when it's not, even, very meticulously observant Orthodox Jews don't conduct their business interactions according to Talmudic law because it's not really capable of doing that. We participate in an American economy. American law governs all of our contracts, all of our financial interactions with one another. And so we study this law as part of spiritual fulfillment, which means that calling it law is perhaps like a misnomer, a mistranslation. It's something else than law, as we often use that term. And the final preface text, this is from Chaim Soloveitchik's, his recently published afterword to a essay that he published, already over 25 years ago, called Rupture and Reconstruction. The thesis of this article was that in traditional Jewish society, nobody ever looked at a book to learn how to observe Judaism. Okay? How much matzah do you have to eat at the Passover Seder is a question that no traditional Jew ever turned to a book to answer, because your entire life, your Zaidi, your grandfather, or your father, would break off a piece of matzah and give it to everyone at the Seder, and that's how you knew how big the matzah was supposed to be. And not only that, but everyone you knew was attending a Pesach Seder where, the Zaidi or whomever was breaking off matzah and handing it to everyone at the table, and that's just what it was. It wasn't something you would reflect upon or question. In an intact traditional society, practice is shared and perpetuated mimetically, just by people copying what everyone around them is doing. In the 20th century, World War I, World War II, mass migration, the breakdown of traditional society, that collapses, and as Orthodox communities reconstruct themselves in the second half of the 20th century, nobody has that assumption that whatever the people around me are doing must be the right way to do it, and so we turn to books for guidance. When you turn to books for guidance, sometimes you end up, oh, look, maybe we should be eating much more matzah than we thought, okay? Have you ever been to a Passover Seder where somebody has those laminated size guides for how much, so like massive quantities of matzah in a very brief amount of time, and it's based on a compelling read of authoritative texts, but nobody 100 years ago would have thought to look to those books. Even though we studied them and we had them on our bookshelf, no one would have thought to look to those books for guidance. It's particularly, and you see this also with the volume of your Kiddush cup and how big it should be, which is particularly interesting because unlike matzah, Kiddush cups will last for 100 years or more. And we have like the granddaughter of the Mishnah Berurah, the great early 20th century halachic scholar, we have his Kiddush cup that his granddaughter had, and it's too small by contemporary standards, which is like kind of a paradox, but it makes sense because he like wrote and he offered guidance, and there's like halachic scholarship, but in terms of people's practice, it was mimetic. In an intact traditional society, people just do things, and the essay was like it was caused a big buzz, and it's available like 15 places all over the internet. It's worth reading if you haven't, if these topics interest you. He wrote again, and he wrote an afterword when it was recently republished, and he compares an enclave of observant Jews who are observing Judaism because of an ideology to a traditional society where there's more flexibility. The enclave is more, he says, consistent than mimetic society, but for the same reason also more brittle. It's more consistent because each practice is consciously related to the other as parts of a larger whole to which one is given one's allegiance and to whose realization one has pledged oneself. So I'm going to make Kiddush, I'm going to eat matzah, I'm going to observe Shabbat, I'm going to say my prayers, all part of my allegiance to this system of observing Jewish law as best I can based on what these books tell me. So that's going to be very consistent, but it's going to be brittle because if anything in that structure breaks, the whole system can collapse. The laxness that seeps so naturally into habit-fulfilling part of a regimen while neglecting another, or the mysterious selectivity that society casually exercises in the choice of which of its cherished norms it will observe and which it will let fall into desuetude, thank you, is far less frequent and often inconceivable in the ideologically based enclave. Next paragraph, a mimetic society is elastic, the enclave is brittle and subject to the shock of sudden collapse. In a mimetic society, parts of the mimetic conduct may disappear over time, but since the habits of conduct which compose it are scarcely recognized as a system, the collapse does not readily spread to the whole. There are certain rituals that, like my machronim, okay? My machronim is washing hands before reciting Birkat Hamazon, before grace after meals. The Talmud endorses it and says it's an obligation. By the Middle Ages in Europe, it wasn't being done anymore. The Tosafot, the medieval scholars, come up with rationales to reconcile what people are doing with the Talmudic precedent, which seems to suggest that everyone should be doing this before reciting Birkat Hamazon at every meal. And they offer explanations because the Tosafot, they lived in a traditional society. They had a lot of faith in the community in northern France and Germany where they live. So if nobody's doing this, it must be okay. And our job as scholars is to figure out, to reconcile what people are doing with the Talmudic precedent. But in 20th century, people now have, there's been a resurgence of my machronim, for example, okay, as we are more ideologically committed. So I'd say when I met Shira, I was very ideological, okay? And now we're going to dive in, and we're going to try to share. I'm going to share first, I guess, some places where ideology, where a commitment that's comprehensive can be challenging and cause problems, and what are some other metaphors, okay? So two metaphors. Are mitzvot to be understood as the command of a king, or can mitzvot be understood as the advice of a doctor, okay? As two metaphors for how we understand. So if mitzvot are the commands of a king, what choice do you have but to observe any individual mitzvah or any detail of a mitzvah, no matter how inconvenient? Okay, you could fail. You could be weak. You could succumb to temptation, or you could come to insurmountable obstacles to observing. But there's no justification to ignore the commands of a king. Whereas if mitzvot are the advice of a doctor, that might open up other possibilities. So an example, there was, the Torah says that a Kohen is not allowed to marry a divorcee or a woman who has converted to Judaism. This is something that is still observed by Orthodox Kohanim. It causes tremendous hardship for some of them. I know a number of Kohanim, this was huge, huge hardship for them as they were a little bit older and not married. And once you get to a certain age, many of the single people you might want to marry or available to date are divorced. And there are some amazing, amazing people who've converted to Judaism. And it's caused enormous anguish for Kohanim and for the people they love and who love them. So I once knew a Kohen who had married a very, very pious convert, and they lived an otherwise observant Orthodox lifestyle. It's a prohibited marriage. The Torah, as we understand it, as they would understand it, it's a prohibited marriage, but I had total understanding of why someone would make that choice to have a loving marriage and raise Jewish children in a warm, nourishing Orthodox Jewish community, even though there was no way for the community to sanction their marriage and endorse it. Okay, that's another example. Another example would be my own personal life. I know that some important early exposure to a more robust and rigorous observance of Shabbat was being driven in cars to relatives who opened their homes to my family and me when I was a child and a young teenager. And were it not for those experiences, I don't know that if I would have fallen in love with Judaism in the way that I did. It's an example of, it's hard to formulate a justification for, again, from an Orthodox perspective, we don't drive on the Sabbath or ride on the Sabbath. It'd be hard to formulate a justification. I know a case, actually, there was somebody decided they wanted, a teenager decided they wanted to, really interested in Judaism. The only possibility was being driven by their parents to a synagogue, which again, they were going to an Orthodox synagogue. They were interested in Orthodox Judaism. They knew that the only way they could get there was being driven or maybe driving themselves for a period of time until they were old enough to kind of figure out their life situation. And it would be hard to formulate an Orthodox psak that endorsed such behavior, or a kid who wants to observe kashrut and he's 14, so he could eat tuna fish, until he graduates from high school, or maybe there are some compromises that could allow him to figure things out, right? Live at home, eat normal food with his parents until he, leaves home as a young adult. It's very hard to formulate psak, to formulate a halachic decision from an Orthodox perspective that could endorse such deviations, but I think we understand why good advice might encourage such behavior, and in a holistic, big picture, we can understand. Okay, there are other examples which we could think of. So what does it mean if mitzvot are the advice of a doctor rather than the commands of a king? So the advice of a doctor, and there's an example here, which I'll say outside. You can sometimes ignore the advice of a doctor, even if you respect medicine. Okay, so here's an example. Okay, you imagine an actor who lands this incredible role in a play, and in this play, she is going to have to smoke a cigarette as part of the performance. 1 cigarette a night, six nights a week, for 3 months for the duration of this play. So she talks to her doctor, and what's the doctor going to say? Can the doctor say, oh yes, you can smoke 6 cigarettes a week for 3 months and it won't harm you? The doctor can't say that. From the perspective of medical science, every cigarette causes a discrete harm, certainly 6 a week for a couple of months. That's a discrete harm. From the perspective of medical science, I can't endorse that. I can't possibly endorse that. But we might understand why an actor would decide to take the role anyway, because they want to express themselves through art, because they need to pay the rent, and this is a great role, because their career, would get a big boost, through this role that was not otherwise be. And the actor respects medicine. The actor respects the doctor. The actor tries to live her life, informed by the wisdom of medical science, but at this particular moment, something else may be a priority. And so it's a way, I think, of softening our understanding of what it means to have a relationship to mitzvot that isn't entirely subsumed under a rubric, under a metaphor of obedience or disobedience, failure or success in fulfilling the demands of the mitzvah. There's a softer approach that's possible if we see mitzvot or halakha or our tradition as a source of wisdom, as something beneficial to us, but that somebody could decide, make a conscious choice that I'm going to prioritize something else at this moment, even though I respect this system as a source of wisdom. These metaphors make sense? Any reactions? Yeah, please.
So as it turns out, I met a Jewish doctor today
Oh.
because I'm being forced to get a primary care physician because I'm 65.
Mazel tov.
It's a rule.
Okay.
I don't like that. I was a little
beautiful.
like, you know, and I don't know if I'll listen, but I'll never forget.
Yeah, yeah, and you can listen, you can make choices even while respecting the perspective that she has, right? Like if you remember during like high COVID, or not, like remember like the tail end, as we kind of had to make choice. Like, you know, there are all sorts of like factors in our lives, and we can choose to maximize COVID safety to like level 9, but then, or we can respect, you know, in COVID safety level 6 because we want to, you know, socialize at level 4. You know, like we all respect the expertise, we respect the validity of medical science, even as we sometimes make other priorities and other decisions. Yeah.
I'd just like to observe first that the way the word mitzvah is generally used is a good deed.
Yeah.
You don't have that as a third option.
Yeah.
But leaving that aside, when we're talking about the two options that you do have, often when we talk about a doctor, we talk about going for a second opinion. Your very first source is about a machloket. And some of us may be aware that there may in fact be rabbis
Correct.
who think that smoking there's a mitzvah against smoking,
Yeah.
and that there are other rabbis, maybe even Orthodox rabbis, who regularly smoke.
Yeah, yeah. So great. So that's good. That's an important. Jewish law is incredibly complex. Every mitzvah, every practice, every custom is subject to intense debate. And what I love about Torah studies, like when you get under the hood and you see like what's actually animating the dispute, and you know, like the surface level of what people do is much less interesting to me than like open up the hood, or I don't know, open the recipe book. I don't see what's actually causing the tension. What are the currents and the values and the traditions and the disputes that are animating the things that we see at the surface level. I would just say, and 9 times out of 10, or I don't know, 99 times out of 100, you have one of these dilemmas. You know, the kid who doesn't want to eat tuna salad for 4 years of high school, or the Cohen and the George. You know, there are, you know, study better, study harder, get a second opinion, get a third opinion, and often there are halachic solutions to these types of problems, or there are rabbinic solutions to these types of problems. That often is the case, but sometimes there isn't, or sometimes there isn't one that the person themselves accepts, right? Like, and so at some point there is an impasse, and at some point is that even necessary, depending on our metaphor? Because there could be cases where you can't find that halachic solution, but people still are going to make choices to live their lives. And it's, you know, like with a Cohen and a divorce, you know, like, is she really a divorcee? Was she ever really married to her first husband? Let's look at the videotape and find out. Is he really a Cohen? What's the tradition? He was a Cohen. How far do we know? Let's look at his grandfather's tombstone and see what it says. You know, like we try to solve these kinds of dilemmas, but sometimes we can't. Or sometimes the person decides anyway, like, look, I'm going to marry this person, and that's the choice I'm going to make. And does it mean that I'm, you know, disobeying the commands of my king? Or does it mean that I respect and honor and revere Jewish tradition and Jewish law, halakha, mitzvot, as a source of guidance, a source of wisdom, but in this instant I'm going to prioritize something else despite being deeply devoted and committed to the system as a whole and to my practices?
Now, I'm sorry, I just wanted to,
Yeah.
I was trying to give you an opportunity to and I don't know what
Yeah.
the practice is at BJ.
Yeah.
To make a comment as to the designated arbitrator, to use your translator here, on questions of halakha and the concept of the Maradata.
Yeah.
And whether in fact you can get a second opinion from the
Oh,
rabbi.
I think here's a trick. I'll just say here's a trick. Okay, if you ask for binding psak, tell me the answer, Rabbi. Okay, then maybe it's not always possible to get a second opinion. But if you say I would like some guidance, then you leave yourself options. Okay, that's a trick someone taught me years ago, and I share that with you. Use it at your peril. Okay, okay. So I want someone else, Michael. Yeah. Yeah. I don't. So maybe so. There's certain strands of medieval Jewish philosophy that divide mitzvah between ones that have rational purposes and ones that have no discernible rational purpose, and maybe the ones that are rational we can't. Well, I don't know. I would say I don't think you. I'm not sure that quite because even if I could acknowledge the rational purpose of a particular mitzvah, I see its benefit, I still might prioritize something else in this instance for me. Like every rule, every law has situations where it's going to lead to injustice, but law has to be phrased in universal terms, right? So I'm not sure that that distinction is quite the same as, let's come back to it if I don't, but yeah, yes.
You framed it as there's something outside the wisdom of the tradition that you're prioritizing. But I would say that it's much more likely that something within the wisdom of the tradition that you're
Yeah.
prioritizing. For
Beautiful.
example, you're prioritizing lo tovia v'adam
Yeah.
You're prioritizing, and that to me is, I always
Yeah.
creating sort of halakha from ethics, then halakha loses its moral grounding to me.
100%, and the interpretation has to be informed by these, sometimes what used to be called like meta-halachic principles, or Jewish ethics, Jewish values have to inform all of our halachic debate and deliberation and study and animate us in searching for solutions to these vexing problems. I still think there might be on-the-ground situations where someone is making a choice to prioritize a different value. That value, let's hope, is also a Jewish value, but a lot of things are Jewish values. So I'm not sure that, when my kids were very little, they went to a day school where we were encouraged to send in mitzvah notes. And the teacher would read the mitzvah note and put it on the bulletin board. So we would send, I remember, Noam did the mitzvah of letting his father drink a cup of coffee in peace, this one. There was like anything can be a Jewish value, but your point is well taken. And let's look at some sources. Let's turn to section. Let's see some sources. And these sources come from an article by Akiva Shai Wozner. The citation's on the first page if you want to follow up. And these are sources he collects. These are all sources that none of them say, and the metaphor of the doctor is also his, the example of the actor is also his example. None of these sources go out and say exactly what that metaphor suggests, but they all point to a more expansive, softer way of understanding the commanding voice of Jewish tradition. So the Zohar uses actually the phrase of Itin Tavin, okay? Good advice, okay? The word of Torah is good advice, which is different from, again, the word of Torah, Yikofa din nahar, let the law, cut through the mountain. No, it's good advice. It enhances life. It helps us. If you deviate or disobey, you're like missing out on that good advice. There may be discernible harm even, but it's not the metaphor that the Zohar is deploying here. It's not the metaphor of the commanding voice of a sovereign. It's the metaphor of good advice, which enhances life if you follow it. Midrash Agadah in Numbers compares the primordial man, Adam in the Garden of Eden, who is maybe all the generations are blaming you ate the fruit, and now humanity is mortal because you ate the fruit, and we're all punished because of you. Aren't you upset? He said, look, it's my own fault. I had. You go to a doctor. The doctor says if you eat this poison, it will harm you, and you eat the poison. You're going to blame the doctor, right? No. So, okay. People do, but you shouldn't. Or this source says you shouldn't. Okay. So in this perspective, it's not that Adam was punished for his sinful disobedience. It's that we suffer the consequence of doing something harmful. And if disobedience is not, if it's not obedience, disobedience, punishment, sin, punishment, but it's just things are harmful. The Torah warns us against doing things that are harmful. So okay, sometimes you might choose to do something a little bit harmful, a little bit risky. I'll have the second piece of cheesecake. I know it's not so good for me, but I'm going to choose to do it anyway. It's a softer, I think, kind of, again, softer metaphor. Again, the consequences are very severe at times, but it's not it's not a punishment for disobedience. It's the consequence of an action that we were warned against. That's like this, and this is like the primordial sin. This is a pretty big deal, and it's framed in a really different way in this source. Gemara Nazir talks about a verily shma, very, very, almost again paradoxical, oxymoronic concept, a sin committed for the sake of God or for the sake of a noble purpose. And what's the paradigmatic example of a sin committed for noble purpose? It is Yael, biblical heroine Yael, who seduced Sisera and then killed him, rescuing the Jewish people. So what's Yael doing? Like, she's a married woman seducing this Philistine general. What permission does she have to do that? What legal justification could be formulated to allow an adulterous affair even for noble purposes? There is none in all normative understandings of Jewish law that I'm aware of. There's no justification for what she did, but it's praised here in the Talmud as a ve'er lishma, that sin committed for this noble purpose, which even might be even better than doing a mitzvah for the wrong purposes. Okay? Wild, wild statement. On page 5, we have Takanat HaShavim. This is a source, this is Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin, the kind of interesting, innovative Hasidic philosopher who writes about Yael. You do not find anywhere in the Torah that it is permissible. Just from there, we learn that she, from her great desire and love to save Israel and to destroy the tormentor and enemy of God from the world, did not look at the sin nor on the filth that he imposed, as they say, that this matter was bad for her, but nonetheless she surrendered herself and thought that even if there is no permission possible for this thing and should be punished for it, nonetheless it was better for it to be lost and to destroy the tormentor of God from the world. And this is what Esther intended as well when she said, and if I perish, I perish. I'm going to do something, Esther also, I'm going to do something that I know and acknowledge is sinful. I'm going to do it for the sake of a noble, greater purpose. So that's also a little bit, right, it opens up a door that there are these sources here. Questions, reactions? And the murder too. Well, the murder, yes, the murder too. The murder, I don't know, in the context of war, is it really murder? I don't know, but correct. It was a, yeah. Okay. Another source. This is from a source from the founder of Chabad Hasidism, Shner Zalman of Liadi. He wrote a number of important books. He wrote a Siddur. If you ever davened at a Chabad shul, you know they have a different, slightly different Siddur. And that Siddur was edited by the Baal HaTanya, the founding rabbi of Chabad, Shner Zalman. He also wrote his own Shulchan Aruch, his own Code of Jewish Law, where he was a tremendous scholar. Disputes is that when he wrote his Siddur, he based himself on the Kabbalistic tradition and prioritized it. And when he wrote his Shulchan Aruch, he based himself on the halachic tradition, on the legal tradition. Okay? Behold the rulings that the Admor, the author of the Tanya, set forth in the Siddur, resolved several matters in opposition to his own Shulchan Aruch. This is the quote here. Turn the page. This is explained for all these reasons. Okay. I'll read in Hebrew. Okay, on page 6. I asked the Rebbe, what should I do? How should I act when the Kabbalists have a different opinion than the halachists, the poskim? Ve'eshiv Admor, mistama yesh linhog kemekubalim. And he said we should follow according to the Kabbalists. That's the basic answer. When there's a dispute in Kabbalah and halacha, we follow what the Kabbalists say. And I asked him, but in your own Shulchan Aruch, you said we should follow the poskim in this precise circumstance. And he answered, Ken Kotvim poskim. That's what the poskim write. Okay? So there are two different genres of creation. Okay? When I'm in the genre of halacha, I follow the halachic tradition. When there's a dispute between the halachic tradition and the Kabbalistic tradition, my even tell us what to do and give us guidance. Yes? Mm-hmm.
And we were trying to compare, sort of the tradition of mine with his, it's mine too, but as a psychologist and as a Hasidic thinker, he was trying to explain to me that Halacha is your cognition.
Mm-hmm.
Is your side?
Cognition.
Cognition, right. And that, the Kabbalistic tradition is your emotion, your feeling. And I don't have anything else to say other
Yeah, so let's go with that for a minute. Let's say halakha is cognition and Kabbalah is emotional life. So, okay, so when they conflict, what do we do? Okay, and we acknowledge that conflict. If you never give weight to your emotion, that's a truncated life. And if you never give weight to cognition, that's like a disordered life, I would say. And so we kind of have to do both. And so, yeah.
There's such an interesting article that this is making me think of, and it's the article by Robert Cover called Nomos and
Oh, yeah.
where he talks about like how the law within the Torah says one thing, and actually the lived experience of the people whose lives animate the Torah tell a totally different story. And in a way, I feel like this split between Kabbalah and Halakha is trying to get at something about that divide.
Beautiful. Let's think that through, okay? So like a classic, the Torah says you can't, if you have kids from different wives, you can't prioritize the child of the beloved wife, just as Jacob didn't do, okay, right? And so you have examples of mitzvot in the Torah that are contradicted by like our patriarchs and matriarchs and how they lived their lives and what they did. Yeah, so I had,
Rabbi Gordon Tucker
Oh.
uses cover
yeah.
in his tshuva around homosexuality.
Fast. And what is he? Do you remember how he deploys it, or what he?
He really uses it to say that the lived experience of what we're learning about
Yeah.
people and their own intuitions and feeling teaches us that there's something above in the narrative lived experience that essentially trumps or takes as much precedent over kind of the halakhic tradition that is kind of a meta
Yeah. Yeah.
in a sense, right? Like that's the way he kind of uses it, and then the tshuva is not accepted as a tshuva because people say it would be a takana, like that.
Yeah.
Because it was too strong.
It was too antinomian, but he would say it's supposed to be antinomian because the nomos isn't good. So that's interesting. So I would say that's similar to what I'm saying, or what I'm saying something a little bit different though, because I'm not. I think what I don't. I assume what Rabbi Tucker is saying is, and therefore we can go back and excise these lines from our law code, and what had been considered forbidden is now going to be considered permissible in light of this narrative of Jewish value, okay. And I think what I'm saying is a little messier. We say we're going to keep the law in the books because we don't feel empowered to change it, but we also now have a metaphor or have a language for explaining the life choices, the religious life choices of a deeply observant, from Orthodox gay Jew who is, partnered in a way that might not be halachic, fully halachic, even by his own self-understanding. But his community understands why a honorable and religious role model even would make these life choices. So it's both. I think I don't know if it's more radical, less radical, different. It's just different. It's just different, okay? It's different, I think, and but I think opens up some of those same possibilities. Maybe a little less neatly, yeah.
You have a hierarchy, right? Like your normative is halakha, and then what might be perceived as deviation is the advice.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think at least in Tucker's, at least in this particular tshuva, he wants to
That even higher, yeah.
and not make that hierarchy. He puts the cover kind of idea, which is the narrative, should have as strong as an influence and shouldn't be subservient.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. So I think I'm saying. I don't even know that I'm saying a hierarchy. I'm saying that in moments in life, there are circumstances that we encounter where we prioritize different things. So if I'm writing a siddur, I'm going to prioritize Kabbalah. And if I'm writing a halakha code, I'm going to prioritize halakha. And if I'm living my life as a married person. I'm gonna, prioritize marital fidelity. But if I'm gonna save the Jewish people by seducing Sisera, I might go ahead and do that and be praised. Even though I'm gonna, all right. And I guess the other, because like El, according to as Takana Hashavim, as Tzedek explains, she is taking. It's what's also more at Esther. What's their nobility is they're actually suffering the consequences of their actions. Like they're acknowledging, like I'm doing something that is sinful or harmful, damaging to my soul, and I'm choosing to do it because it's going to like save others. It's like a very noble kind of sacrifice. And I think maybe Gordon Tucker's tshuva maybe kind of resolves everything in a very nice, in a beautiful way, in a sweet way, but a little different from what some of these sources are saying. Thank you, though. Other comments or reactions? Okay. Yeah, Michael.
Does that essentially take the two metaphors and blend them together?
Say more. I'm not sure. So what do you mean by that?
Okay, you started off with two separate metaphors. Mitzvot are the commands of a king, and mitzvot is the advice of a doctor. But where you come to is that the two are blended. Even for a king, right,
Yeah.
they would be blended. Is that the sum total of?
I think we can relate. Look, God as King is a metaphor that is, from the first page of the Siddur to the last page of the Siddur, God as King is a very, very powerful metaphor. And so, if the Torah is mitzvot from God, what we're supposed to do, so it's very hard for me to escape from that metaphor entirely. I think what's helpful about the doctor and medical advice or these other models is that again, the softness for encountering like the messiness, or for people for whom it doesn't quite work and they make other choices, and we could, right? Sometimes people like they feel they have to, like racked with guilt over choices they don't feel they had, or the best situation they felt, and it could be no, you don't have to, like, you're still a good Jew, like you're still you still love mitzvot, you still love this system, and you're still devoted to the system. And in this moment, at this time in your life, in this circumstance, you made a choice to prioritize something else, and that's something that when we have multiple values, multiple systems, like interacting, like that is sort of a normal thing to do. Yes, one, two, three, and then we'll do it. Yeah.
It strikes me that like a king is sort of a step up from a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And that they're not on an equal playing field. So that taking the doctor's advice, it would seem to me, would be sort of a kind of a work, I hate to use the word workaround, but it's like, it's not like you're saying they're both good ways to.
Yeah. Like if our sole metaphor is the commands of a king, then there is we're a little bit stuck. They're a little bit stuck, I think, and it really is only. You could say extenuating circumstances, overcome by weakness, human frailty. I hope the king is merciful. There are all sorts of ways. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, we acknowledge all of our failings as you reinforce God as King as like a primary metaphor in our liturgy. So it's definitely possible to acknowledge failure, even as we're invested in the metaphor of God as King. I just think that this alternative metaphor can open up possibilities that are a little, the possibility. Okay. Yes, 2 and 3. Yeah. And then, yeah.
I'm not sure that I can express this as a question, so I'll express it as my own conflict,
Okay.
and then maybe you can figure out what my question is.
Okay. Or I'll be happy to embrace your conflict. And yeah.
So my conflict is that I see the Torah as a creation of people, not so much, not as
Yeah.
something from heaven. But I'm very drawn to the life of mitzvot, which is the sense of being commanded.
Mm.
And so that creates a lot of intellectual and
Yeah. Like, can there be commandments without a commander? Or, yeah, or commandments that are imposed by a sense of tradition or obligation. So you'll have to answer that for yourself. And I think to some degree, yes, it's possible to feel deeply committed. I mean, the truth is, even within a very, very traditional Orthodox understanding, many of the mitzvot that we do are rabbinic legislation, right? That's like a huge proportion of them. So, which we acknowledge are the creations of human beings who legislated these particular observances in a particular time and place, and we feel very, behold, the fact that I don't know, the mitzvot of the Hanukkah, Purim, okay, most of the restrictions of the Sabbath are rabbinic restrictions, and they define our religious life. So I think it's possible to feel a sense of obligation even to things that are human, and then the question is I guess I would say, well, the ultimate source of that obligation is God wants us to invest in the system, and if you think that people created it, then it's, I think, a little, I guess I would say, your perspective, the advantage is it maybe opens up flexibility when you or your community feel flexibility is necessary. I think the disadvantage is it might be more challenging to create a sense of obligation and pass that on, from generation to generation if the system is acknowledged as being entirely human in its genesis. So that would be, I would say, the advantage and disadvantage of sort of that worldview. You also had yeah.
Is there anything in the teaching about where the line is? Like, you go to the doctor, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get this advice, like, you should get vaccinated.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. Or your kitchen. And you're like, no. Right? Is there a line anywhere?
Yeah. So I think at some point you would say that person is, I'm smiling because I prepared for this teaching by spending 45 minutes on the phone with a surveyor, like a puller from the CDC, doing a vaccine survey, response. So I said I was very enthusiastic about vaccination, and I thought they posed no risk to me whatsoever. So I take that, RFK. That was my survey result. So I think there are. What you describe, that would be somebody who doesn't care about medicine, right? That would be somebody who doesn't actually value medical science. And there are people like that, and that's a perspective that exists. And there are also people who don't care about Jewish tradition and don't care about mitzvot and don't feel that it's binding or obligatory or something they care about. And that we know people like that's like many people we know very well live their lives that way. I think the animating question of these sources or of this ongoing investigation is people who do care about mitzvot, do care about Jewish tradition, do want it to govern their lives and be like the primary orienting point of their lives, and also decide to prioritize other things in discrete moments. And is that because they're weak, or is that because they're disobedient, or is that because, no, actually, the system has examples in it, our tradition has examples of alternative sources of authority which sometimes intersect with the normative authority of the law.
Saying you have to find an alternative source of authority.
If you, otherwise you would, look, if you say, I'm going to skip Shabbos this week, I'll skip Pesach this year, I'm not going to observe Passover this year, I'll observe it sometimes, not this year. Because I don't know, there's a movie coming out on the first night of Passover, and I want to see it in the theaters on opening night because that's kind of fun. Like I wouldn't say, oh, that's a person who really cares a lot about Jewish tradition, but they're prioritizing something else. That doesn't sound like somebody who doesn't vaccinate their children because of something they saw on the internet. Like that also, somebody's probably not respecting medical science as a discipline, okay? But somebody could respect medical science as a discipline and also decide, I'm going to smoke a cigarette occasionally because my art, okay? I want to contribute to the world as an artist, as an actor, and this role can let me do that. would say, yeah, would I make that choice? Maybe not. Your doctor's not going to endorse that. Your doctor can't endorse that choice. But I really understand why you're going to make that choice, even as somebody who respects medicine as a discipline and as a form of wisdom and guidance. Yeah?
Everyday life, the decisions of everyday life, how do you prevent yourself from becoming a subject?
Look, some people, there's a very powerful trend in our tradition that says you should see yourself as Sa'ana Avda de Kuchabrichu. We are servants, we're slaves, we're to the Holy Blessed One. That's a powerful element in our tradition, and maybe you should see that way. The problem is that sometimes people don't follow what they themselves acknowledge is their halakhic obligation, and sometimes, if they're ideological about it, that can be and their commitments are strong but brittle, that can lead to a collapse of the religious commitments, or it can lead to incapacity and guilt, or it can lead to people giving poor advice, right? Because they don't feel empowered to give good advice, like don't eat tuna, it's probably not gonna work out so well for you if you eat tuna, here's another one more example, and then we'll look at the last source. The Torah says, Lifnei Iver, make sure you're not allowed to place a stumbling block before the blind. The rabbis in the Talmud understand that prohibition to be a metaphor for not giving someone bad advice or for enabling someone to sin. The paradigmatic example in the Talmud is there's non-kosher food with you on one side of the river, and there's something on the other side of the river, and there's it's like a basket and a pulley or something, and they say, pass over that non-kosher food to me from your side of the river to my side of the river. They can't get that food without my complicity. Don't place a stumbling block before the blind. It's a prohibition against me to enable that person to sin, because they can't get to that bacon cheeseburger unless I put it in the basket and send it to them across the river. So what about giving food to somebody who will eat it without making a bracha? Not allowed to eat food without a bracha. You give somebody food, they're gonna, won't make you suspect they won't make a bracha on it. Maybe that's a prohibition, a violation of lifnei iver, of placing a stumbling block. I'm enabling this person to sin by giving them. So Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who was the great 20th century rabbi, he died in 1995. Was confronted with this question. There was a yeshiva that was welcoming a very, very wealthy donor to visit the yeshiva. And they suspected that he would not say a bracha on any water that was offered to him on his visit to the yeshiva. So yeah, can we give him some water? It's a very hot day. This was in Jerusalem, hot Jerusalem summer. Can we give water to this thirsty mega donor to our yeshiva or not? Are we enabling him to sin by giving him water? Because he's going to drink the water without saying a bracha. And anyone want to guess what he said? Yeah. Okay, fine, all right, good. Anyone want to form an argument for why he said it was okay? Health. No, I don't know. He'll be fine. He'll get the water afterwards. He'll be a little thirsty. He'll be a little schwitzy. Oh, you can make the bracha for him. Very good. Okay, that works. Well, let's all drink some water to the bracha together. You could do that. That's nice. Yeah? Oh, maybe if you don't offer him water, he would be embarrassed. I think they used to. I think they used to. Maybe that was like an example. I think maybe years ago in the 50s, at some rabbinical school, they would offer you water when you came in for your interview, and they would see that okay. Anyway. Rosh Zalman said, Lifnei Iver, okay? Let's look at this prohibition, let's look at it holistically over the course. If you don't give water to this thirsty man who's inclined to be a donor to your yeshiva and support Torah scholarship and through his generosity, if you don't give him water, he's gonna come to hate the Torah. He's going to come to hate people who study Torah. It's going to be this long-term, the really negative impact on his life. And holistically, if you look at like the big picture of like your impact on this person's life, give him the water, welcome him. Maybe he won't say the bracha, but he's going to, give money. He's going to be involved in Jewish life, and you'll invite him to, your house, Shabbos meals. And this person, over the big picture, this person's going to like turn out better and do more mitzvot and violate fewer prohibitions in the big picture if you look at it holistically. That's also like a little, that kind of, I don't know, it's like let's zoom out a little bit and see the big picture rather than answer every single question on a narrow technical way. I want to look at one more source, and then I will get your question after, okay? Let me ask, because this, oh, fine, okay. So midrashically, famously, Abraham gave food to all, he fed everyone. According to the Midrashim, Abraham was very hospitable, and when his guests would say, thank you so much for your meal, he would say, don't thank me, thank God, and he would lead them all in Birkat HaMazon, or some early version. So Abraham, maybe is like our example of somebody who encouraged his guests to bench. Shimon Shkop is a really, really interesting early 20th century Rosh Yeshiva, Lithuanian Rosh Yeshiva, who develops kind of a Talmudic, almost of like natural law. He sort of says that there's, and he develops this throughout his like Talmudic commentaries. This is examining a case, okay? There's a position in the Talmud, which should be very clear, okay? Jews are not allowed to steal, not from anyone, never allowed to steal, okay? Clear. There is, however, a Talmudic position that perhaps Jews are allowed to steal from Gentiles under certain circumstances, okay? That position exists. It is rejected, okay? That's not okay. However, even within the position that it's permissible to steal, if you steal a lulav and etrog, you can't use it to fulfill the mitzvah. Because he said there's a difference between permissible and forbidden, and are you allowed to take this thing, and if you take this thing, are you violating the prohibition of stealing, and maybe not in circumstances A, B, and C, but it's still not yours, it doesn't belong to you. And so there are concepts of Shimon Shkop's like way of understanding halacha. There are concepts like ownership that are like almost like a foundation upon which like the mitzvot and the halachic system is built upon. Okay, I own something, you own something. This is like property, and that's a foundational kind of almost like human, natural law almost kind of concept. And halacha comes and tells us additional rules about how Jews are supposed to interact within those concepts of ownership. And so maybe it's permissible to steal something, but it doesn't belong to you. And so you can't use it for benching lulav. And he gives many, many other examples in his writings of this really. That's also, I think, like a way of saying there's something not just like outside or above halakha. There's something like beneath. There's a foundation of like basic justice, basic right and wrong that is there in the world, and then halakha just comes and gives us obligations as Jews upon that and how to interact with these concepts that are a priori, that exist before the mitzvot come, and specifically tell Jews how to interact with these concepts. And I've thought a lot about, not a direct translation, but there's there are people who I've turned to me for, it was like Spherias suffering from mental illness, and they can't, sometimes with some physical additions, they can't, like they need to knit or to sew or to, or on Shabbat. Like they can't, okay? As a deeply necessary piece of their mental health. And I sort of, and there are many halachic arguments you could make. Is it pikuach nefesh? It could be life-saving medical intervention for you to get the, to make the phone call to the therapist, or the phone call to your friend so you're not isolated on Shabbat, or if you, for your obsession, has to be treated by whatever it is that you do that you find helpful, whether it's knitting or cutting things or whatever it might be, like that. There are halachic arguments that can be made, but I also, like fundamentally, there's like a basic concepts of having a degree of like physical and mental stability upon which mitzvot are obligated. And like maybe sometimes it's almost as if like don't consider yourself obligated in like, you have to like work on psychic and physical stability and basic health. And then the mitzvot are incumbent upon you to like figure out to do as your best you can. I've said versions of that to people with like some chronic mental and physical health challenges who were really, really troubled by their seeming over a period of months, like inability to observe Shabbat as the way they understood that to be. And I just, like, there are things that are foundational, that are more fundamental. The mitzvot are commanded upon people who have a degree of psychic and physical health that you don't have right now. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Reminded me, if I'm recalling correctly, that Rav Kook in his book, Shaarei Tshuva, the first chapter was about, before you can begin the first step of tshuva, of repentance, make peace with your body.
With your body. Yeah, Rav Kook has this holistic, this very like, the whole universe is returning to God and returning to wholeness and unity, and so he would see physical soundness as part of that tshuva process, because the whole world for Rav Kook is doing tshuva. It's a very powerful, also holistic kind of vision of what intimacy with God and closest to God entails. Yeah.
There's a great story that was reminding me of the examples you were giving about sort of having some flexibility in the biography of Heschel by Ed Kaplan, that Rabbi Heschel and Rav Schneerson, the Lubavitch Rebbe, were at like a party or gathering or something in Berlin with a man who wanted to marry a woman that wasn't Jewish. And apparently the Lubavitch Rebbe spoke very strongly, very sharply to him, and Heschel was sort of much more understanding and wanted to understand his work. And many years later, when the Lubavitch Rebbe's wife was unable to have children, he called Heschel to get the name of that guy.
Wow.
He said, I need to apologize to him
Wow.
because I was unable to see the bigger picture.
Wow.
Maybe that's part of the reason that,
Whew.
I mean, has the Holy Ghost, that's the reason.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
He thought back to that moment where he had not reacted with compassion, and like many years later wanted to find the guy and thought of it.
Wow, that's a powerful story, really powerful story. Oh. Other questions, comments, reactions? Okay, so I think we're just about out of time. If you think of a question or a comment tomorrow or in the shower tonight and you want to reach out to me, my email is on the source packet, so please feel free to be in touch and to reach out. And I'm so grateful that you gathered and we had a chance to talk about these issues together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, David. And now I'm going to embarrass you a little bit. So back when I was doing social media, one of the three most connected people that I encountered on social media was David. Another was Shai Held, and another was Joanne's friend Joseph. And I don't know when you ever slept, because anytime I posted anything about Shira, I would hear from you within minutes. So, it was amazing. But one of my favorite postings of yours was from your days in Lakeview. Lakeview is an amazing community in Chicago. It's just south of Wrigleyville. The Jewish community has a single Tikkun Leil Shavuot for the entire community. It's not by congregation. They have a restaurant called Mel's Barbecue for the Perplexed. Mills Barbecue for the Perplexed. And you posted, I remember, during the World Series, that you were pleased to have be able to offer an aliyah to a concessionaire who was Shomer Shabbos and staying in your community. And you introduced him to the congregation and then said, it would be unseemly to pray for the outcome of a sporting event. But it would be perfectly acceptable to pray for the opportunity to offer this man our hospitality next week. Yeah, and I love that story. So that, and I thought that was quintessential David. So thank you very much, David. This was wonderful.
I want to thank Rabbi Wolkenfield again, and just to say, in terms of the teaching I think that you've given, I think, is a window into how David works in the world. The fact that he's in this Hartman seminar, which is a mix of rabbis from different denominations, and I think both your rigor and your softness come through in very strong ways. And to be in relationship with different rabbis in a pluralistic space, and both to have the rigor and to have the softness really matters. And I think in the world we're living in, where there's so much more rigor and much less softness all around the Jewish community, to say yes to both. And I think our community, obviously, sometimes I think could use more rigor, that we, it's like different communities have different work to do to create that sacred commitment where people feel encapsulated by something that's deeply compelling, whether they source it to the heavens or to a commitment to one another. And I think Lori, to your point, there are great books thinking about your very question, like where does commandedness come from? And if we don't think the Torah was given by God definitionally in some sense, then how do we sustain commitment and covenant? And so I think both of those questions are deep ones about how does a community stay committed if it doesn't have the rigor? And how do we create that sense of Shabbos or all the other things that allow us to show up for one another because of our commitment to a covenant and a commitment to God in whatever ways we define that. And so, and I think also it speaks to who Shira was too. Maybe her commitments around rigor were not exactly the same of yours, but she certainly had a commitment to rigor and softness in the same way. And that was one of the things that was beloved about her, which is one of the things why I think you loved each other so much. So thank you for being here. I look forward to seeing you just in a little while in Israel. And thank you everyone for being here tonight. And tomorrow night, there's a class. Rabbi Becca is teaching on Kabbalat Shabbat, 2 sessions, and then we'll be followed by Ari doing music on that. And of course, the Shabbat of Martin Luther King weekend, we're honored to have Eric Ward, who is an activist and as you do his incredible work around with the Jewish community as a man of color who looks at the intersection between anti-Semitism, racism, and Islamophobia, and how we all need to band together to change the world we're living in, and I hope you'll join for that. So, good evening to everyone, and have a good night, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.